Hey guys, welcome back to the Weekly Talkthrough. I am Katie, joined by Evan. You may wonder why we are not touching knees this week, and unfortunately, HR said that was a liability, so we had to send Evan away to Boston. But thankfully, he could still join us over the interwebs, and we are here to go over the most important news in gaming and esports this week. Kicking things off, you may have seen that the NCAA has its eyes set on collegiate esports. The Board of Governors is going to be talking about it at their scheduled October meeting, and that has a lot of esports veterans spooked. So to kind of flesh this out a little bit, help people understand just who the NCAA is and why these esports veterans are concerned, the Daily Walkthrough reached out to CSGO former professional Tomi Lerpis-Kovenin, National Association of Collegiate Esports NACE Executive Director Michael Brooks, and University of California Irvine Esports Acting Director Mark Deppe to get their thoughts. You can find out the whole thing, get the whole interview with all three of those guys on our website, The Daily Walkthrough. We highly suggest you give it a read. But they essentially said, A, that the NCAA is going to essentially legislate collegiate esports to death. Right, Evan? They also said that I believe Lerpis's biggest issue was that athletes would not be able to monetize themselves.
Right. Yeah, it's a little bit of a complicated situation just because there is so much regulation that has to go into NCAA sports already. Right. I definitely think, if esports does become an extension, under the NCAA's jurisdiction, a lot of those regulations that are already in place are either going to have to be extended into esports, or they're actually, what I think is more likely going to happen, be written over entirely. Right. There's, like you said, there's a lot of issues regarding, players having a salary, whether or not they can monetize their efforts athletically while being
was the biggest sticking point.
Right, while being under, their academic contracts and everything like that. I think that I feel mostly the same way as a lot of the higher ups in esports right now, in that I don't know if this is necessarily something that the esports industry will benefit from. I think obviously, the NCAA has a shit ton of growth. But to be completely honest, I think that people stepping in and trying to maybe over-regulate a lot of the aspects of esports that don't really need to be touched upon is going to not only hinder the industry, but also hinder all of the esports athletes that there are already in the professional scene.
As Brooks told the Daily Walkthrough, when I asked him, the NCAA could bring behemoth resources, people, talent, knowledge about this to the industry, he agreed with me. He said, quote, "The amount of expertise the NCAA could bring to bear would be staggering." But I followed up with, "Do you think it's worth it?" And he said he wasn't really sure and ended up pretty much saying no. So that's been the general consensus, is that people are worried that the NCAA just wants to monetize for themselves. They're worried that they're going to regulate collegiate esports to death, and they're worried that perhaps they just don't have the best intentions.
Yeah, I'm curious as to see where it's going to go. To be honest, I think, like we said, the majority of people are somewhat anti-NCAA involvement. But I'm sure, as we move on, we'll see pros and cons to both sides. Moving on, though, our next topic of this week is the NA LCS Promotion Tournament for the spring split of 2018, in which we saw teams like Team Liquid and Team Phoenix 1 try and defend their roster spots for the NA LCS, along with teams like Gold Coin United and E United try and battle both of those teams out in order to take their spot. Unfortunately, for both of those challenger teams, Gold Coin United and E United, they were not able to manage to squeeze themselves into the NALCS. Yeah, Phoenix 1 swept. Liquid had a great run too. E United ended up beating out GCU for the second final try that Sunday, but unfortunately we're not going to see any of those teams in the NALCS this upcoming split. I'm excited to see Team Liquid and Phoenix 1, now that they've revitalized their strength in their rosters and managed to hold down that spot. I think we're going to see a lot of really good competition from them coming forward.
Did we really expect teams like Gold Coin United were we expecting many upsets, or was this pretty much looked at as kind of a formality?
Yeah, that's the thing. A lot of times these promotions, obviously it's a great opportunity for challenger teams to make the next step into the professional scene. However, just, simply from the fact that teams that are already in the LCS, and in the case of Team Liquid have been for many splits, it's really, really, really hard to match up to that level of experience. Particularly in the professional scene. Obviously challenger teams get a lot of opportunity to scrim other challenger teams, but most of the LCS teams are very isolated in the fact that they basically only play against each other, and they're very familiarized with how all of the other teams play. Obviously GCU and E United had potential to show off some pocket picks maybe, or surprise teams like Team Liquid or P1, but I think for the most part those two teams are experienced enough to the point where they can handle something like an oddball thrown their way.
And which they did, because clearly they came out on top.
Right.
But hearkening back to the NCAA, there's been other collegiate news that's been breaking this week. It's really been a collegiate college level eSports week for the industry as a whole.
Definitely.
Blizzard Entertainment and Tespa released a press release late yesterday announcing Tespa University among a $1 million influx of cash into collegiate eSports. So a little bit from the press release, they said, quote, "They are leading the greatest year in collegiate esports yet, with a robust lineup of competitive leagues and more scholarships and prize money than ever before." Tespa University was just introduced, and it is described as a one-stop online resource dedicated to help users create or participate in their local college gaming communities. It will have $1 million in scholarships and prizes. I mean, Evan, this is huge for collegiate esports, and it makes you wonder, timing-wise, if this is going to factor into maybe perhaps the NCAA being interested.
Yeah, 100%. Like you said, these massive influxes of cash, particularly into the lesser developed collegiate scene, are only going to get bigger, at least in terms of people attempting to have those influxes of cash happen. I am excited and also afraid. I think that, with so many people playing games during the age groups, that coincide with being in college, that really is one of the biggest subpopulations of gamers around. I think it's obviously very important that we further develop those opportunities, especially as esports is getting so incredibly big. But at the same time, like we were just discussing with the NCAA, I think we have to be extremely delicate not to make agreements that could possibly hinder either the growth of the industry or, as discussed earlier, the growth of athletes in regards to their, salaried opportunities, let alone just having the opportunity to be a professional esports athlete.
Right, and Tespa University, this whole thing, it's going to encompass games like Overwatch, Heroes of the Storm, Hearthstone, StarCraft 2, World of Warcraft, and Rocket League. And on top of that, Georgia State University just also announced that it will be joining NACE and the George Esports League, according to Forbes' Heather Newman. So that's exciting. Another university is coming into the fold. But last but not least, guys, you may have already seen it. If you haven't, the Daily Walkthrough has a fun little giveaway we're doing. If you want $100 in Blizzard cash to maybe buy some loot boxes or do whatever you want, we have that available for you. To check it out, to enter the contest, please go to thedailywalkthrough.com. Sign up. There's a few ways to enter, and we hope that you join, and we wish you the best of luck. This is Katie and Evan with The Daily Walkthrough. This is your weekly talk through, and we will see you next week for the biggest news in gaming and esports.
Bye, guys.